Hello friends! Today I would like to talk about learning languages and to share my experience and my tips. Specifically, today I would like to talk about reading. Of course, reading is a basic skill that you need to master when you're starting to learn a new language, but sometimes it can be intimidating. It can be intimidating when your grasp on the language is shaky and you open a book and so many new words and new phrases appear that you feel like you'll never be able to figure it out. And it also can be intimidating later when you already know the language, but perhaps not sufficiently that you can read without a dictionary. So my technique for reading in the beginning when you're still just learning is this kind of parallel reading technique where you read a book in the language you're learning along with that translation of that book in your native language. And you can use whatever reading material that you like. In general, on this topic, I am of firm opinion that you should read whatever you're interested in. People say find simple books or books for children, but if you don't find the topic interesting, you won't be motivated to read it, to do it often. Because the thing is with language, people usually don't progress because they don't devote enough time to it. And the language, it's not like swimming. The language is more like, to me, the metaphor I would see is like trying to run up a hill. So if you run very slowly, you'll never get to the top. You just have to accelerate and go for it. So start reading as soon as you can, as soon as you know the alphabet, as soon as you know some basic sentences. Just start reading. And reading a book that you already read before, that you know well, is very helpful because it will give you this motivation, it will give you this crutch, and it can help you learn vocabulary. But mostly, I recommend this method just for reading, just for getting more exposure to the language. And so here I'm going to present to you my Rosetta Stone. My Rosetta Stone is a novel by Erich Maria Remarque, which is Heaven Has No Favorites in English. And ever since I read it as a teenager, I am a fan of the sentimental maudlin story, and I read it in whatever language it's been translated in and that I speak. In fact, I read it so many times that I know the story by heart. So it's quite useful when I learn a new language, and so here I have a copy of that novel in Bulgarian. So when I was learning Bulgarian, it just seemed natural that I would use this method. When I read this way, when I do this parallel reading, I don't rely on a dictionary so much. I just try to read for the story, and I usually, so I would put the book in the language that I'm learning on top, and I read a sentence or a paragraph, and then I read a sentence or a paragraph in the language that I already know. And at first it may seem a little bit complicated or confusing, mostly because you have so many new words or new grammar that you don't know. But I recommend just persevering with it, just continuing and reading, because eventually, especially if you get into the story and you start reading just because you want to read, you will begin to see patterns. Every writer has his or her own vocabulary, and they end up using the same words over and over again. So you end up figuring it out. When I read this way, I don't necessarily write down words, or I don't necessarily look up words in the dictionary, but I still end up memorizing quite a bit. It's mostly a way to enjoy reading and enjoy learning another facet of the language. But once I have a better grasp of the language, then I move on to reading a little bit differently. Reading generally is a great way to learn a language because it boosts your vocabulary. You can learn so many new words and expressions. On the other hand, it's a little bit passive. If you want to learn a language to speak, reading will not be a substitute. It won't replace having an actual conversation with a native speaker. But there is a way to read that makes it a little bit more active. And so it goes something like this. I start reading, I read a sentence or a paragraph, and then I summarize it for myself. So, for instance, I would read here in Bulgarian: Клерфе спря колата пред една бензиностанция, където снегът бе разчистен и натисна клаксона. Clerfe, the main character, he stops his car in front of a gas station where the snow was cleared, and he honks. And when I summarize it for myself, I don't necessarily say all of this. I just say something, Clerfe spra colata. And that's it. It's usually just something simple like this. Clerfe stopped the car is enough. And then I continue. When I read this way, of course, it takes much more time. It requires me to use the dictionary, but it's such an effective method, and just spending even half an hour doing this kind of reading has its rewards, and even after a few days, you already feel a different understanding of the language. These methods are not particularly unique or nothing new. Many other linguists and polyglots have something similar, but it's something that I discovered that works for myself through trial and error, and I enjoy reading in general, so these methods work for me. Of course, everyone learns differently. My goal when I learn is not so much to be a student of the language, but to make the language an organic part of my life, to the point where I don't use it, I feel that something is missing. And since I do enjoy reading, I enjoy books, I love literature, it's natural that I devote a lot of time to discovering language this way. Of course, if you have your own tips on how you learn languages, or how you read, or what you're reading currently, then please share them with me. I always love meeting other people who enjoy learning languages and learning from them